Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started then if you're ready, Sam.
Yalla, let's do it.
Okay, let's jump in then. Thank you all for those who have joined us in this session. My name is Eric Sipe, and I am Hamla's U.S. National Organizer, and I am joined with Azim Hijazi, the CEO and founder of UpScrolled, a new social media platform that we're going to be talking all about. So if you haven't heard about it, you will learn quite a lot in this session. But before we dive into UpScrolled, um, I was wondering, Isam, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know a lot of people, especially in the Palestine and digital rights world, have been introduced to you through UpScrolled, but would love to hear a little bit more about you and what you were doing before UpScrolled.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Eric. And hello, everyone. Islam Hijazi here. As mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of UpScrolled. I'm a Palestinian, Jordanian, Australian. I was born and raised in Jordan. I had my bachelor degrees in computer science, and I've worked with big tech for the past 17 years. So I worked with the likes of Oracle, IBM, Hitachi, and small startups here and there in different areas, including AI, data management, data integration, and so on. I also have MBA from INSEAD, and I've lived across multiple countries. So obviously Jordan, one of them. I lived in UAE, I lived in Singapore and Australia, and I'm currently in between countries. I'm currently in Europe, just traveling around for business. I've started UpScrolled about building the actual product about a couple of years ago. And I don't know if you asked me, but I'm just going to tell you the reason for building UpScrolled right away. Is because I've seen other social media platforms been imposing shadow banning and selective censorship to Palestinians' content in particular. Of course, they do that across other marginalized groups across the world. Was as a Palestinian witnessing really the genocide in Gaza and trying to talk about what's happening and having friends all over the world. And I asked them, "Do you see my content?" And the answer was, "What content?" And then I came to learn about the shadow banning, and I've researched that, and I've seen many content creators, people complaining about that, and they were seeking for alternatives. So I thought maybe it's time to give people back control to their voices and having them enabled to speak about things that matters to them. That's including Palestine, obviously, but also everything else.
That's great. Yeah, no, thank you so much for diving right into why you started joining UpScrolled. I'm really curious, what was your sort of relationship with social media when you decided to join UpScroll? Would you say you were an avid user? Were you posting a lot? Were you using it for social commentary? Kind of, how did you think about social media when you decided to start UpScrolled?
Yeah, no, good question. I've never been a content creator. Let's put it that way. I rarely post on social media, and at some points in my life, I completely removed the apps or deactivated my accounts because I felt they're toxic in a way. In a way, they're addictive. They take away a lot of your time without returning any real value to you. So no, I wasn't commenting or viewing or being active social media users. And even my experience, like professional experience, is not related to that at all. But during the actual genocide, which is still happening, I was like everybody else. I was trying to understand what's happening and get news from people on the ground, like from journalists in Gaza, and see the real story rather than what's being broadcasted on different media outlets, news outlets. And I was just only a viewer or trying to repost or reshare content from those people on the ground, so I can get the word out and having more people learn about what's happening. That's only have been my experience with social media. I understand how it works from a technical perspective. Don't get me wrong, but as a user now, I wasn't really an active one.
Okay, that's fascinating. Yeah, and maybe now could you take us through your process that you underwent when you were starting Upscrolled? I think there's a lot of, I mean, myself as a technical person, I wouldn't even know where to begin when starting a new social media platform. And I know that for the vast majority of the development, you were essentially working on your own. So can you tell us a little bit about that process?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to building a social media platform because you're touching on many areas. Technical aspect is one of them, obviously. Building the infrastructure, ensuring that the infrastructure can scale to millions and millions of users. But there's all set of other problems that you need to deal with. And you need to deal with customer support, which is user support in this case. You need to deal with content moderation, being able to flag bad content. You need to test the app on different devices, which is quite challenging. Starting social media network today is much harder than starting it 20 years ago. 20 years ago, things were more simple in a way. Users were accessing social media from computers through browsers, so there was not a lot of tech involved in building, and expectations of users were pretty much low or had no expectations at all because it's a new thing. Right now, users are really exposed to the likes of what Meta provides, what TikTok provides, what X provides, and Blue Sky, and all the other platforms. So they have certain expectations. Like they want to be able to do certain functional or find certain functionalities within the app to be easy to use, to be fast enough, and so on, to be working on different devices regardless of where they are. So the challenge is really much bigger than it was before. So it's not really the easiest thing or business to start, so to speak. But I felt that we needed to start something because there was no viable or ethical, let's put it that way, alternatives out there. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It took me, when I started working on that, November 2023, and the actual launch was early July 2025, so last year to be specific. And between now and then, we had different kind of engagement rates, which we can talk about later on.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm reminded by my colleague that I forgot at the beginning of the call to mention, if anyone is looking for simultaneous Arabic translation, please use the Zoom link in the chat. And my apologies for forgetting to say that earlier, but we do have simultaneous translation available. Sorry about that.
And maybe also if anyone have any questions and you are able to, I don't know, have questions in the chat. I don't know if there's chat function in here, but feel free to ask and we'll be able to answer them at some point, maybe.
Yeah, certainly. I was planning on definitely trying to get to some audience questions after we get through some of the pre-prepared questions, but would definitely encourage all audience engagement possible. But going back to that process that you were working through when you were starting, I know that you were supported by and worked with Tech for Palestine. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found Tech for Palestine and kind of what sort of supports they offered you as you were going through the development process?
Yeah, great question. So up until July last year, I did not really interact with Tech for Palestine. I knew that they exist, but when I did launch the product, I thought of speaking to Tech for Palestine and bringing them into the play here. So I did speak with Tom Hall, who's a co-founder of Tech for Palestine, Paul Bigger, co-founder of Tech for Palestine. I said, hey, I've built this app and platform, and I would like you to see it. And they were like, hey, we've been waiting for that. Let's help you, in different ways. And Tech for Palestine, generally speaking, it's a non-for-profit organization. They provide support in different ways, whether that's through volunteers, that's through connections, through reach, and they provided that. So they were able to provide me with volunteering support from the organization itself. They were able to provide me with connections with different people in certain positions in the technology industry, with investments as well as helping me as advisors. Let's put it that way. These people come from technology background, different experiences in the industry, and when it comes to social media, you kind of need all kind of help and support from many areas, and Tech for Palestine did provide that. We continue to have a great relationship with them. I think they are a phenomenal organization in what they're trying to build at an ethical alternatives to many, I would say, products, not necessarily only technology, but really across multiple areas as well.
That's great. Yeah, Tech for Palestine is a close partner of Hamla as well. So definitely encourage folks to take a look at the work that they're doing if they don't know. But now that we kind of have a little bit better of an understanding of where UpScrolled came from, kind of the origin story, if you will, I think a lot of people came to know UpScrolled earlier this year when there was the coinciding takeover of US TikTok that many of us in the digital rights world felt was a very politically motivated authoritarian takeover, that one of the primary drivers was because there was a lot of honest speech and content about Palestine proliferating on the former version of the platform. And that takeover coincided with a huge uptick in users to UpScrolled. So I know you mentioned already that the official launch was actually in 2025. So the platform had been around actually for about a year by the time that happened. I was wondering if maybe you could give us a sense kind of scale of where you were at right before that happened. Was it an intentional decision to really try to market yourself as a ethical alternative when the takeover came into effect, and maybe walk us through some of those issues and pain points that happened from that huge upsurge in usership?
Absolutely, great questions. So before the actual launch, so we did launch in July 2025, and I knew before the launch, when the product was being built, etc., that there's a willingness from people to switch to an alternative if there is one. And I've been doing some researches in different ways on different forums, and I understand that they would do that if they found the right alternative. So that was like first check mark with for me. So after the launch, we started to see small surge in users. That is in July, from 0 users to about 50,000 users in July, which was promising, as in, yeah, people are looking for an alternative. People started to talk about it, and we got picked by certain activists in the Palestinian movement in general, and they started to tell their followers about UpScrolled. It's an alternative. It's owned by a Palestinian, Jordanian, Australian, etc., etc. And they had like a huge following on the other platforms, like in the hundreds of thousands or in the millions, and that created some sort of viral effect that got that initial batch of users to be onboarded into UpScrolled. That kept going throughout the rest of the year up until early January this year. So about 6 months after the launch, we had about 150,000 users globally. Most of them were in the US, in Australia, in Europe, UK, and then small numbers of them were in the Middle East. And up until then, we did not really spend. I keep saying we, but it was pretty much myself as an official capacity, and then having few people volunteering their time, helping me in different areas when they have time. But it was only when me working on this as a full-time person. So yeah, no promotion, no branding, no advertising whatsoever. It was purely organic. It felt like a small community growing slowly but steadily. There was plans for new features, which I was hoping to get more users coming in or knowing about the platform and coming into it. But then the TikTok deal, as you mentioned, happened. The official sign off and the acquisition by Larry Ellison in the US, and that was something unplanned. I remember I was in the US when that happened. I was actually at the Tech for Palestine summit in San Francisco, and before my actual speech, I was looking at the dashboards, managing tickets, etc., and I started to see something strange happening. I mean, I've seen a surge. I started to see the app ranking becoming higher in the app stores, in the Google Play, as well as the App Store, Apple App Store. And that wasn't something I was anticipating or planning. I knew about the TikTok deal is about to happen, but I did not really anticipate to see a big movement or expected that to happen with confidence. Let's put it that way. And then during that day and the following day, I started to see hundreds of thousands of users sign up on the platform, and then the app ranking climbing into number 12, number 11, 10, 9. And then by the end of January, we were at number 1, sitting across multiple countries, including the US, including UK, including Australia, including Saudi Arabia, I believe, and other countries here and there, or at least in the top 10 charts in different countries. And between the 22nd and the 30th of January or 1st of Feb, we had over a million of users sign up. And then between then and now, we have about 5.7 million users. So we're talking, about 2 months multiplying the users base globally. And again, we haven't done anything really to push this as an advertising or branding. It was purely word of mouth. A lot of the buzz happened on platforms like X. We were trending. Everyone is telling everyone that their followers to sign up and move into UpScrolled as an alternative to TikTok, and the internet did it thing. Really, I mean that people did the heavy lifting for us, and we were not involved in any of that. So it was surreal. I'll tell you that it wasn't expected. And then we started to get all the attention from different media outlets around the world reaching out. They want to have interviews. We were invited to Web Summit in Qatar when that started. So I flew from the US directly to Qatar, and I had one of the keynotes at the first day in the morning. And the growth continues until today.
That's great. That's quite the journey that you all have been on as a platform. And obviously, with that amount of growth, I mean, social media is a really difficult thing to build and manage in general. And with that amount of growth that quickly, I'm sure that there was a lot of challenges that came with that. And we're starting to get more questions in the chat as well around some of the technicalities of the platform. And I'd love to dive in a little bit more to some of those things, and maybe start with what your approach to content moderation is, as was kind of the driving factor for starting UpScrolled, and how you think of content moderation, freedom of expression, protecting folks against incitement to violence and actual harm that could take place on the platform. If you could walk us through a little bit what your approach and philosophy around those issues are, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can imagine, with the influx, a huge surge that we had, that wasn't something that is completely planned for. It was pretty much, like I mentioned to you, one-man show in a way, doing everything, including the content moderation through a basic system that I've developed. And I was relying on people reporting bad content. And then once it's reported, then it's being reviewed, and then certain decision is taken. We have community guidelines. We do support free speech, but responsible free speech. We don't want to have UpScrolled to be a toxic place where people don't feel safe, where people see content that is nasty or bad in general, content that is racist. Those community guidelines enforce our principles in what that should look like, and they are being enforced as needed. Now, when we had the surge, as I mentioned to you, that was a one-man show. There's a lot of bad actor around the world, and those bad actors obviously wants to do their thing, number one, and maybe we were targeted because, for one, I'm Palestinian, and that is a good target, from different angles. And we can talk about that shortly if you want. But that was another part of maybe an initial surge of bad content that we had, within the platform. But I was able to quickly hire a team who specialize in content moderation in order to tackle the issues that we have within the platform itself. And the process is pretty manual, so people report thing, or the content moderators actively go to the platform, they spot something, and they action the moderation itself, whether that's, for example, hate speech or pornography or something like that. Now, in plans, we were thinking of introducing a little bit of intelligence to detect, not to automate the decisioning. But if there's like certain confidence in something that is pornography, for example, then it will be flagged, and then, not waiting for someone to report it. But once it's flagged, then a human in the loop will have an opportunity to look at that and then make action according to what's really needed to be done. And that's an ongoing process. Social media platforms, big ones today, they still continue to have this problem, even with all the funding that they have, with all the experiences that they have. They've been out there for more than 20 years, some of them, and you still see bad content, hate speech, etc., up until today. If you open one of those apps, I guarantee you'll come across some of those content. So it's a problem that every social media platform faces. It's a universal thing, and we're no different, obviously. It's just that we need to have the right tools and methodologies in place to help us become faster in decision, and that's happening as we speak now.
So what I'm hearing is that currently everything within your content moderation system is manual, is primarily relying on users flagging, but you now have some folks that are sifting through and actively looking to ensure there's not bad content. You have plans in place to create an automated flagging system, but that
Right.
as of right now, it's your intention to always ensure that a final decision for takedown would be a human reviewer, and you wouldn't be automating takedown at any point. Is that kind of an accurate overview?
Yeah, I would say to a certain extent, yeah. But then there are certain content which should be taken down immediately, and that's include CSAM content. So if the system detects CSAM content or pornography with certain confidence, we might be tuning the decisioning only for this kind of content in order to avoid users being exposed to this content, because that content can be really harmful. But that doesn't mean that's the final decision. That means that's this kind of content would go into a queue where it's held, so to speak. It's temporarily not seen on the platform unless a human says, "Oh, okay, this is actually an okay content, maybe for educational purposes, whatever," and that can go on. Or if it's actually a CSAM/pornography, then no one really needs to see that. So there might be a certain automation for selected extremely harmful content, I would say. But yeah, this is something that is being discussed internally, and we're speaking with experts, that can help us in this area as well. We want to build something that doesn't really restrict people freedom, but still protect people mental health. That's one aspect to look at this, but also their exposure to things that can be harmful to their mental health in general.
Right. I mean, it is a very difficult balancing act when starting to try to make decisions around what is appropriate speech versus what isn't, and how do you not restrict freedom of expression within that. And I'm wondering, I mean, there's also a lot of powerful actors that have their own agendas, specifically states, and I think on the large mainstream social media platforms, when we're talking about Palestine, we know that the Israeli government makes tens of thousands of requests for takedown to platforms like Meta. We know that a lot of moderation systems are based on Islamophobic and anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, racist designation of terrorism by the U.S. government. So how do you think about, and how are you responding to any sort of pressure from state actors in repressing speech?
We will stick to what we believe is right. The reason for building UpScrolled is as a response of these actions. We will not be a platform where we just say, okay, because you think that's the right thing to do, then we will do it. If we believe that's against our values, if we believe there's no real violation to regulations across different countries, etc., then that's not something that we will act on. We take this very seriously, Eric. We're trying to build a space where we want everyone to be able to speak their mind, whether that's Palestinians or else, without the fear of being censored or shut about. As long as, again, it's not toxic content, it's not hate speech or incitement for violence, etc., etc., I don't think anyone should be silenced or should be censored for their opinions or their thoughts.
That's really great to hear, and I mean, I think it's really difficult when you're talking about state actors that have the amount of power that they have, but obviously the influence that they've had and continue to have on the mainstream platforms is a huge issue. Within kind of all of these things, all of the decisions that you're making, the policies that you're creating, the systems that you're creating, how do you think about transparency and ensuring that users and civil society, human rights defenders have an understanding of how decisions are taking place on the platform?
Amazing question. We're involving, or we were talking with different civic society organizations, with human rights and experts in the field, minority groups, to be involved in the process and shape how we grow and build the actual product. And we want that by design, not because we think it's nice to have, but because we think it's the right thing to be done. We don't want to build a product because we believe it's great for profitability for the wider people. We want to include people in the building process, and I guess those organizations represents people. And in addition to that, we listen to what people are telling us. So we continuously monitor the different channels, including direct emails, for example, but also what people are saying on different social platforms, and we take that into consideration when we want to build a specific feature. Again, when we build anything, we follow something internally that we call the North Star, and that North Star basically is a set of principles that we believe that we should always follow in everything, in any decision that we do within UpScrolled. And in short, that is something that, a product that is created for the greater benefit of people rather than only profitability of the business.
I am glad to hear that, and it would be great if those were widely held values that were actually implemented and not just given lip service by many other platforms. But within this conversation, I think something else that is really important is digital security, right? And we know that there are many bad actors that especially use bugs in newer developed apps to try to gain access to devices. There's a lot of targeting of the pro-Palestinian movement and of journalists and rights defenders in general that are speaking truth to power and undercovering things that folks don't want to be undercover. So how do you think about digital security? How do you think about keeping your users safe? And what sort of systems do you have in place for that?
Yeah, no, that's a great place. We take security very seriously. We do a lot of standard security tests to ensure that nothing really falls between the cracks in the systems that we have within the app itself or within the back-end system. In addition to that, we're trying to build with security by design as a principle rather than something that comes later on. That also means we are conscious of the data that we collect from the users. So we collect the minimal amount of data that is required for the app to actually operate. So we don't collect private information, even with things like date of birth. We don't collect the full date of birth, just month and year, for example, and just to verify your age, that you are over, for example, 16 years old. In addition to that, we continuously now at the moment do a lot of testing and have certain connection with ethical security researchers who are able to play that role of someone who's trying to exploit the system in different ways, and that is in a managed way. So we can see if there is anything, if there's a gap, if there's a security hole that needs to be covered, and we are being proactive about it. And we also soon introduce certain programs which allow researchers, generally speaking, to submit their findings if they find something, and that can be fixed. So we do take security quite seriously. We collect the minimal amount of information, and as organization outside of security, we will never be in the business of selling user data or giving user data voluntarily to anyone who is asking for it.
That last part there, I think, is so important, and many folks don't even realize how important that is in terms of how horrible big platforms are in terms of using user data. And that's a very important side of sort of digital rights concerns. But there have also been some other folks within the digital rights community that have been critical of some of the choices that UpScrolled has made. I'm specifically thinking about a decision to not be an open source platform. And I'm wondering if you could talk us through that decision a little bit, and maybe also there's some folks in the chat that are wondering if you could help do a little bit of comparative analysis between UpScrolled and other alternative platforms like, say, Blue Sky or Mastodon.
Yeah, no, great questions. I did consider the open source path to start UpScrolled with, but the current open source projects that are available, they're not in the right maturity level, and there's certain complexity when it comes to the user experience. Day-to-day users, they want something that they're used to, understand how it's done without the complexity being involved. And some of those open source are not so open source as much as you think. So even with Blue Sky, there are certain components that they control. So it's not really fully decentralized platform, for instance. And there is certain level of moderation, or not even moderation, but censorship within the platform that a lot of people complain about. And you can go and do a quick Google to come up with some of those results. The other thing is, when it comes to the privacy of users, these platforms or these systems tends to be extremely open in a way that users cannot really control what's being exposed to the public. So if, say, Eric wants to have a private profile, then that's not an option, within these platforms. And some people just want privacy. They just want to, have connection with their, family, friends, and that's it. And then look at things that's happening outside of that. But they don't want people outside of that to see the content that they post. So that's one of the things that these platforms or open source platforms really lack. Now, the real question we want to ask here, are we open to the idea of integrating with them at some point or becoming an open source? Then the answer is yes. I believe when these platforms or open sources becomes really mature, or when we believe, our technology systems is in the right place to be an open source, etc., then that's a possibility. We're not saying no for that forever, but we're saying we need to get the things mature enough and having people to have the right experience, so the move or the switch cost is very, very minimal for them when they do the switch. If we complicate things for them, and that's the case with Mastodon and others open source, they will be repelled. The performance is poor, and there's a lot of issues that's happening there. Day-to-day users, they just want to be able to sign up, post, follow, without the complexity of selecting which server, and that server might have problems, and the fact that they want their profiles to be private. So these are some of the challenges that you face with existing open source technologies.
But I'm hearing that you're very open to the possibility of transitioning to open source in the future.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. This is something, it is not excluded when it is the right time and when those technology are in the right maturity, so to speak, as in providing the functionalities that everyday users are expecting. But we wanted something that works today, not something that works after 3 years and having to wait until that happens. That's basically why we choose the route of not being open source at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Something that I'm also seeing in the chat here that is another contrast to this time more mainstream platforms rather than alternative platforms. What is happening with viewability on content when I open up UpScrolled and see what's going through? What sort of algorithmic interventions are taking place, if any, that show content? How does UpScrolled work from a viewability perspective?
Yeah, great question. So by design, the first thing that you see on the app that when you open it is your chronological feed, and the chronological feed is content from people or users that you follow, organizations, etc., etc. It's not something that we inject. It's not something that we manipulate by any means. So if you follow me, if you follow some other organization, some news, maybe content creator that posts about cooking or traveling, that's everything that you're going to see in that specific feed. So you are in 100% control of what you see. And this is similar to how social media used to be 20 years ago. If you go to the initial days of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, now X, that's exactly how it was. And we were happy with it. We were seeing, content from our cousins, content from our friends, following some news agency, and then see the news when it happens, and then looking at hashtags, and that's it, all in chronological order. So we're just returning that to be used by users, so you as a user have full control of that. Now, if you want to explore other things outside of that because you're interested in some other topic, then we created something that's called Topics and Discover. And the way you can see content there also is in chronological order or ranked, so without really complicated algorithms. And the way the ranking works, it's basically the content with the highest engagements in terms of likes, in terms of comments or reposts being pushed to the top over a specific window, 4 hours, and they decay over time. It's as simple as that. So there is no favoritism, there is no way to manipulate it. It's not based on your preferences as a user. It's just based on what people think at that particular moment is something trendy worth, for example. But it's as simple as that. So there's no AI/machine learning/personalization based on your liking as a user. And that's by design. That's by design because we want you as a user to log off. We want you to get out and do things in life, go to the library, pick up your, a book from the library and read it, play with your son, daughter, family, spend time with your friends, rather than spending time because we want to create more profit or because we want to create an addiction loop like other apps. And coming to the addiction loop, I think you've heard the latest news with Meta losing a lawsuit for that specific case. And we are by design, do want to create something to create addiction. Social media network should be simple, should be a way just for you to catch up with what's happening around you within a short amount of time, and then having you to do life, which is much nicer and fun out there.
Yeah. And as another sort of contrast to the major platforms, you've already mentioned that I believe you said that UpScrolled will never sell user data. Is that's correct?
Absolutely.
So then with that in mind, some folks in the chat are also wondering, have you thought at all about ads on the platform, and how do you think about potential synthetic pay-for-play sort of content?
Yeah, so look from monetization perspective, there are multiple ways that you can get monetization on the platform, and ads is not the first one or priority one for us. There are other things that you can do, from verified accounts, from users or organization with verified accounts, paying different subscriptions to get the blue check mark, for example. We're also in plans to introduce things to allow you to subscribe to users' content. For example, if Eric likes Isam's content because Isam loves to travel and he posts all the time about his travels, and you want to contribute some amount monthly for me, you can do that. And then ads will come at some point within the platform, but it will be selective. It will not be open to everyone. Again, this is something I mentioned to you earlier. We are building an ethical social media platform, and that means ethical in every step. That means ethical even if someone wants to pay us money to put an ad, if we don't approve them as an organization, as a company, if we feel that they have been complicit in certain bad things happening around the world, that's not going to be something they are able to do. So that's going to be how we run, for example, ads. It will be localized to the communities according to where they are, but it will not be based on your preference. It will not be based on what you have clicked, or because we are tracking you outside of the app through cookies or something like that, like the other apps are doing. It will be very traditional in a way, and not something that's filling your timeline for the sake of just because I believe there are different ways of generating revenue for the company rather than just running ads for the sake of it.
So I'm hearing that you would have a very different approach to content moderation of paid for play advertisement versus organic content, which we see that there's, in some cases, it seems as though there's less content moderation of paid for play advertisement on a platform like Meta with some of the horrible things that they accept profit for.
Exactly. Precisely.
So there's an interesting question in the chat here that I wanted to move to around the fact that big tech heavily controls data ecosystems and access to information. So they're wondering what kind of database architecture and data sources you have that you can ensure both scalability and independence, and what kind of issues did you go through in terms of accessing or licensing data?
Yeah, good question. So unfortunately, the big tech controls the infrastructure around the world, at least the reliable one. So if you want to provide an optimized experience to the end users, then you will end up, unfortunately, using some of those big tech technology. And that's okay. And I'll tell you why that's okay for now, at least. We need to start somewhere, Eric, and we need to provide an optimized kind of experience to our users. But by doing that, we can still do certain techniques. So the data within these platforms are encrypted, they're not being accessed, there's specific contracts in place that does not allow them to do certain things, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these things are in place. Now, moving forward, what we, our ambitions as a company is to own our own infrastructure at some point. But running infrastructure and building infrastructure at the early stage is not really liable. It does have a lot of complexity involved in it. It does involve or require a lot of investments upfront. And if we just want to complicate things and say, this is the only way, then we were not going to be able to build anything that is efficient or good enough for users around the world to be able to use it. So I think we need to take simple steps, one step at a time, in order to build the full digital independence. But for me as an individual, that's my ultimate goal, to build the full digital independence, not only to build a social media platform, but we need to start somewhere. And we're starting with a social media platform because I believe it is one of the things that can touch many people's lives across the world. It's one way to communicate, to let people communicate freely without bias, without censorship or selective censorship, to be specific. And then based on that, there will be a lot of learning that can help us in becoming digitally independent in different areas. And that's personally my biggest ambition, is to become that at some point.
That's a great ambition. And that's also leading me to think a little bit more about, you've already talked somewhat about your plans for and vision for the future. And as I ask this question, I just want to note, I've tried to integrate questions from the chat in as much as possible, but please keep them coming. And if you think that maybe I misrepresented a question or misunderstood it, please feel free to put something back in the chat. But as we see people put some more questions in, I'm wondering if you could just share what your, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, vision and goals for UpScrolled look like.
Yeah, no, good question. UpScrolled vision is to become an ethical mainstream social media platform. We want to reach as many people around the world. We want to be the actual app that is used by everyone around the world. And it's okay, even if it's used by people that we don't agree with. We want everyone to use the platform. Now, the only difference, or one of the differences actually, that we will do within UpScrolled is that we will not censor voices because of propagandas or agendas, political or else. That is our philosophy. That will be always our principle. And as a platform, we will always, have the ambition to become better in terms of functionality in providing things that are different, as in differentiating functionalities. Currently, we're starting with something relatively similar to what's out there. So if you downloaded the app, if you open the app, you'll see something related to, or something similar to Instagram, to X in a way. But we want to have at some point, and hopefully very soon, differentiating kind of features. But we wanted, or the philosophy behind starting with something familiar is because we wanted to provide a familiar experience to users who are moving from existing platforms and not having them facing any difficulties in learning or not knowing what to do, etc. But at some point, we will be introducing interesting features, new features. I don't know what they are today, but we will have the right team. We will do the right R&D. But one thing I can promise you, it will always be in an ethical way, not in a way that is, again, designed for addiction or designed to exploit users' data or sell users' data, or on the cost of having more profitability over the well-being of the actual users. This is really the principle that we will always stand by and continue with.
And based on another sort of principle that we've talked about a little bit, but I see Hija in the chat is asking if you have plans on sharing transparency reports at some point. And I would just add, as somebody that reads the transparency reports of Meta, for example, I can say very strongly that those transparency reports oftentimes just pat Meta on the back and are written in a way to a general audience to seem that Meta is doing everything possible to support human rights, when folks that are really in the work, like Hamla, would say, like, this transparency report is actually not of much value and is just making it seem like you're doing what you need to do. So I would add to the question, how do you ensure that those transparency reports will be meaningful as well?
That's a good question. And these things are, being planned internally. We are definitely planning to have transparency reports being published on specific periods of time, and they will be reflecting whatever decisions that we have done internally, specifically, obviously related to the content or content moderation or certain incidents that happens within the platform. We will have also connections with certain groups and organizations to hold us accountable for things that we action as well. So we want to be held accountable. We want, like I mentioned to you before, we are in touch with civic organizations across the world, and we want them to be part of what we are building, and we want them to hold us accountable in the things that we are doing. So when we publish those, when we make a decision, they will be involved, in addition to our users as well. And look, Eric, just to make it clear, like I mentioned, people are not stupid. They can tell what's real and what's not. Meta have been telling people certain things. We users know what's the reality, and you can spot that easily. So if we say this is our transparency report, and if that doesn't make sense, people will be able to spot that. And this is not something that we want to do. This is our goal here is to be completely transparent with our users, to be, again, ethical platform, and to act accordingly. And if at any time we are seeing that we're drifting from that, people will sense it, and internet will do its thing. Let's put it that way, and the word will be out. And I definitely never want that to happen.
Well, I can certainly tell you that the internet will do its thing, and that civil society will be very loud when they feel as though there's been anything that has gone adrift. And I see Maha has a slightly different question that I'm interested in as well, based on your approach to having a more chronological timeline and things of that nature. They're asking that there's different sorts of posting, from text to videos to photos. If you have any sort of benchmarks or statistics that indicate what is the best method for growth and visibility for somebody that's trying to grow their audience on the platform.
I'm not gonna lie, we don't have those statistics yet. We're not collecting enough data about these kind of engagements, but it's definitely being planned, as in to understand what content is engaging more than the others. But as of today, we can't tell for a fact which one is performing better than the other. Especially we've been only viral or big for the past couple of months or so, and even those can be skewed in a way that they can't be accurate. So I just don't want to give you a fluffy answer and tell you videos, because most I would say videos, but it's not based on facts. So until we do this exercise internally and come with it, I'd rather not just giving you assumptions. And part of this, me being transparent, because I don't want just to, again, being fluffy about anything, and also to highlight the fact that we are just focused too much on building the platform experience and enhancing things and scaling, and there's so many things, even though this is a priority, obviously, just to understand the user experience. But currently we have like a huge list of priority that we just need to tackle first before diving into those questions, which again, I believe they are essentials for us to understand what we need to optimize, but we don't have the stats that I can provide you now on the call.
That's totally fine. Thank you for being honest about that. I'm seeing another question from Hija that we already talked about a little bit earlier on, in terms of state repression and threats that may come with the platform not wanting to comply with what you would see as unethical requests from states. But I'm wondering if there's anything else you have to say on that. And specifically, Hija is asking what sort of planning for those scenarios you have done.
So let's put it this way: we're having the right experts in place just to make sure that we do first the right thing, and we're not doing or there's anything that's going illegal. We want to again foster a healthy environment, ethical environment within UpScrolled, and we don't want to just respond to requests from agency and voluntarily just give that away. Unless it is legally binding or necessary, so to speak, in certain situation where there's risk or something like that. And for that, we're having the right, like I mentioned to you, experts in place who are aligned with our values and where we want to be, and we will act accordingly. Additionally, this is something that I've wrote on the website before, that we're willing to change jurisdiction as a company if that is necessarily for us to continue operating in the freedom, in a free way that we want or aspire to be. And if we see a need for that to happen, we'll action it. So what I'm trying to tell you here, we will do anything that's possible to protect that, and we will fight and push back where necessary.
That's I think that's all you can commit to at this point, I guess. So thank you for sharing that. We just had some new questions come into the chat, so let me take a minute here. So there's a question here that I'm not sure exactly how much you are comfortable and would be willing to share, but around some more specifics with your digital infrastructure in terms of safety and security. So like, where are servers based and what sort of legislative frameworks you would have to deal with based on the geographical location and those sort of things.
Yeah, I can share some of that information. So our data is located in Dublin, in Ireland. It's one of the best jurisdiction when it comes to data protection, user data protection, as well as laws. We will continue to operate within that jurisdiction, regardless where we are incorporated. And like I mentioned to you, everything that we have within our infrastructure is encrypted at rest. It's encrypted in transit as well. So as long as it's being communicated, regardless from where to where, it's not something that can be intercepted or be hacked, so to speak. Same thing applies to the data being stored in Ireland itself. So we're coming back to a point that I've mentioned before. We're building a bunch of systems, really, because there's not really one system when it comes to social media, that are with security as a principle by design, without having any trust of who is holding our data or our users' data in general, or the actors that can access the data or want to use the data. We're not relying on goodwill of governments, organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So we're building those in place. And soon enough, we will introduce encryption that is end-to-end for certain functionalities within the app. For example, messaging, which is something Meta is taking away from the users. So we're giving that to users in UpScrolled at some point. So we can have end-to-end encryption for messages. So that means even if UpScrolled itself wanted to see messages, they will not be able to see messages within the platforms or system that we have. So this is all being done by design and by choice as well.
Okay. Well, I think my dog is reminding me here that we only have 3 minutes. Hopefully Corby has not been too loud or distracted, but I see one more question from Chris, and then maybe we can move towards wrapping it up. But pretty straightforward question in terms of what does it mean on the platform if different states have different strict policies around certain type of content, and how would that change for a user based on geography?
We will need to adjust, obviously, and that adjustment is necessary for the continuity of the platform. We can say, oh no, we're not going to comply with that specific regulation, but if we do that, then the states unfortunately have the power to shut down the access to the platforms through different means, whether that's by blocking access to the IPs of our servers or by completely removing us from the App Store in that specific country or location. So in order to be flexible, I think we will assess the situation based on countries and then make the best decision based, according to the laws and regulations for that country. We did not really experience anything yet in that regard, but I expect that to happen. But again, just like everything else, number one priority for us is protecting user assets, rights as well, and fighting for them wherever that's feasible and allowed by law within legal boundaries.
That sounds like it's very aligned with the principles and values of UpScrolled in general. So I'm not surprised to hear that, and I hope that as situations arise, you're able to navigate that. I guess in closing, we have about 2 more minutes. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm wondering what is your sort of final message to the audience about UpScrolled and what folks should know about it that maybe we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, no, thanks, Eric, and thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. Just one thing is be patient with us as we're building things, scaling things, becoming better. We will become the go-to platform and covering all the functionalities and features that you aspire to see in social media platforms. I think also we need to be forgiving in general for each other in a way when building our own systems and having or getting our own digital independence in a way and supporting one another. The support that I can get from you people, everyone on the call, I believe is essential, whether that's by using the actual platform, by spreading, by also letting us know if there is something that is missing. Feel free to reach out directly. I almost look at most of the requests that comes in and make sure that they are being responded to and actioned as needed. So thank you, and I hope to see you on UpScrolled and hear from you in there.
Thank you so much, Issam. I really appreciate it, and Hamla really appreciates it. And thank you for everyone that was able to tune into the conversation.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.